How to find other people to play against or with. That's one of the biggest problems facing the miniature hobby enthusiast these days, at least based on my own anecdotal data. Well, on this joint episode between Paint All the Minis and the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast, Dan and I are on a mission to solve it. Will we succeed? Possibly not. But will we die trying? Almost certainly. Let's get down to business.
I hear a lot of people who are like, I ain't ever got time to play, or I ain't got anyone to play with. That's like two common complaints that a lot of people have, right? It's finding the time to have those games. And then it's also, I don't have anyone to play with. And especially when you think about, like, I won't say non-mainstream games, that's not true, but just like maybe not the headline games that are from the usual producers of games. So it's like if you want to play like a Moonstone, or you want to play a Drop Fleet Commander or Drop Zone Commander, for example, those are really good games. But if you said to somebody who plays more mainstream games, said, hey, do you want to play that? They might kind of poo-poo it and be like, no, I don't want to try any new games. I only want to play these ones that I know that are in the public eye more. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of talk to me about your current. Do you get as many games in as you want right now? Are you looking to get more games? Like, what's your current status?
So when I first got back into the hobby, it was the old, and lots of listeners will be familiar with this, just talking the wife into playing something with me. And I'm not talking about even like a middle of the road board game that we could kind of meet halfway on. I was just like getting the full Kings of War regiments out and everything, setting up the upside down Subbuteo mat. And she humoured me a bit, but especially now we've got a wee girl, there's just no chance of being able to do that. Or, if we get some free time together, we're probably going to spend it doing something different. So the recent games that I've got, I've been with my pal Robert, who I mentioned. He's been on the show a few times, and the good thing about that is, like, he's a big RPG player. He's done a lot of D&D over the course of his life, so he didn't really do your more traditional miniature games, but it was easy for him to jump into this sort of thing. So we've been playing some Rangers of Shadow Deep, we did some Song of Blades and Heroes, and we've got a few more games of various things lined up as well.
So how often are you playing? What's the kind of frequency of you playing, and are you happy enough with that?
Yeah, I would say so. So in the sort of winter months, which in Scotland is like 10 months of the year, we were I reckon we were hitting about monthly, and I was, to be honest, I'm really happy with that. I've got a lot of wee projects and things that I do on an ongoing basis, so I don't like to pack my schedule full. I don't like to feel like I'm too busy. So if I'm making space for a game, I like to see it on the calendar, and I've got a couple of weeks. Maybe there's a couple of extra miniatures I need to get ready for it. So it's a nice adds a nice bit of depth. I've got that paint motivation to work towards something. I know that the game's coming up, and I know that after the game we could have a bit of a chat about it for the podcast too. So there's loads of layers to it, if you like. It's not just we meet up, we play a game, and it's forgotten about.
Yeah. So so once a month. I mean, because you've got to also think about, we talked about this previously in terms of like hobby and in seasons and different things like that. And you've got a young family, so that takes precedence. You're also quite into keeping yourself in trim as well. So that kind of is above. Like, what is those the two things that are above gaming? You obviously got work, you got family, and you got kind of like fitness stuff. Is there anything else that goes above gaming? Is gaming like your fourth priority?
My podcast and stuff too. So like running my audio drama show takes a lot of work as well. So the gaming's important to me though, because and the painting and stuff, because it's good leisure time, it's good downtime. But I don't think we'll get as much done in the summer, purely because when you do get those sunny days, you want to probably be out in it rather than stuck indoors, or at least I do anyway. So
I guess the kind of point that I'm trying to kind of guide us towards there is that maybe before you start like putting posters up around the local area asking to play games with people, you kind of, maybe a good idea to think about how often you want to play, who do you want to play with, what sort of people, do you want to play on a weeknight? Do you want to play on a weekend? Do you want to play once per month? Is that enough? And what sort of games do you want to play? Because you mentioned trying to tempt the wife into Kings of War. Like, that's a tough sell. Right?
Yeah,
That's a hard one to sell. And I'll talk more about that and what me and my wife play and how I started that a little bit later. But yeah, probably kind of my advice to people who are thinking about playing on a regular basis or playing more is think about, well, what would you be happy with? Because you want to avoid that new gym situation, don't you? You know, where you've eaten all of the turkey over Christmas, and then it's like, oh, I need to join a gym. So you hand your money over. You go every day for the first 2 weeks, and then never to be seen again. Like, you want to avoid that situation. You want to make sure that when you're starting off something new, you want to make sure that it's a regular habit. And that term regular is something that can completely be defined by you. So you saying that playing once a month is what you like. You like to look forward to it. You like having it on the calendar. You like kind of counting down to it and preparing yourself for it. That's an important step, right? Because once you've created that slot, you can then look for someone to fill that slot. She says, that kind of makes sense, right? So did you do that beforehand, or were you just like, hey, Robert, like how did you? So talk about personal experience. Like, how did you go about? Why Robert? Why not wife? Why not somebody else?
Yeah, just I guess it made a lot of sense. A pal who lives close by, we're always talking about, because he's got a wee girl as well, so it's right. Difficult for us to get together. And you know, sometimes you think we should go to the pub, but you know what? You go to the pub, there's a whole other load of logistics around that, like getting home and are you working the next day and stuff like that. So rather than doing that, it seemed to make a lot of sense of, you know, well, let's just grab an afternoon, we'll meet up and we'll roll some dice and see how that goes. Because he was really up for it too. It wasn't a forced thing. It wasn't a, you know, please come along and humour me. Like, he was really into that sort of stuff too. So it just made a lot of sense, and I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner.
Yeah, and if people are looking for someone to play, they're looking for players in the area, or they're looking to do, because like I said, it's a fairly common response when you ask around. Like, you say, oh, hey, you're into that too, you know, and you get around to talking and chatting, and people talk about time, don't they, be an issue, and they talk about not having anyone. Those are the main things. So we're trying to kind of eradicate both of those to get more people to play. So you're a once a month man, and so you mentioned that you was into RPGs. So what games did you start to play, and why, and what was your approach to him and that? Was it just like, I want to play this game? Do you want to play this game that I want to play? Or like, how did that evolve into doing what you do? How did the conversation go? How did it come about?
Yeah, I think I'd suggested that we get together and have a wee game of Song of Blades and Heroes. It's quite difficult to say sometimes, but and I was just saying to him, look, it's a really easy skirmish game, you know, low barrier to entry. Not because I thought he was thick or anything. He picks these things up quicker than I do, which obviously isn't hard. But I thought let's put the least barriers in the way here and just see how it goes. You know, we won't need loads of time. We won't need loads of miniatures. We won't need loads of gear. So it was really easy to set up, easy to get together, and had a game, and it was really good fun. And I thought, as much as I love that game, I thought maybe there's scope for doing something a bit more ongoing, because I brought along 12 miniatures, made 2 war bands, fought each other. One of us won, I can't remember who, but that was it. And I know you can do campaigns with that game, but I was at that point getting really into the Rangers of Shadow Deep book, and I thought this is a great opportunity to do something cooperative and really story driven. And I just really liked what I saw in that book. So we've done a few games of that now and thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think we'll kind of stick on that for a wee bit, and just kind of play the story through.
Yeah. So that's cool, man. And so I think the kind of first thing that we kind of think about and talk about, the first kind of bit that I would recommend is, and that we both recommend, it sounds, is like figure out how often you want to play and figure out what you'd like to play. I think that's an important thing, right? And that's not a case of like, well, I can only play on Saturday and I can only play this game. Like that's pretty closed. And that's fine though. Like, if you want to do that, it's totally fine. It's like, I only want to play BattleTech, and I only want to play at 2 p.m. on a Sunday, right? I mean, like, you can be that. That's one end of a spectrum. Or you can be like, I don't mind what I play, I don't mind when I play. That's the complete opposite end of that spectrum in terms of open. So open and closed. You need to find yourself on that kind of spectrum. How about you in terms of openness? So say if like Robert hit you back and was like, oh, hey man, there's this kind of game that I've been wanting to try for a long time. And, I was about, we give it a whirl. We tried a couple of games that you like. I was about, we try this game. What would your response to that be?
No, I only want to play my own games. No, I'm only joking. Of course. Yeah, of course I would. Yeah.
Because that'll be important a little bit later in the stuff that we talk about in terms of like give and take. But yeah, so you think that first kind of thing, do you think it's important to think about like how often you'd like to play and what you'd like to play? Would you kind of be in agreement with that? Definitely.
And I hadn't given it much thought, but yeah, like you're saying, imagine you spend all that time and you like really want a game or something, and then you find somebody and they're proper texting you every other day, and you're like, look, I want to do like every 6 weeks, and they're like, no, we'll meet tonight. We can meet tonight. I've got a hotel room. I've got a hotel room and some D6.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It's important. I think that's an important step that we need to think about beforehand, because you don't want to be like, palming the other guy off because he's so much more into it than you are, and avoiding that new gym scenario, I think, is something that's really important, and that goes for any hobby or any activity that you do. You want it to be sustainable long term, and you want it to be a positive habit, I guess, right? And you want it to be something that you look forward to. So if you're gaming like once a month with Robert, like there's something to look forward to. It's a positive habit to get into, and it's something that occurs, and you're looking forward to it, counting it down, you're preparing for it, you're getting ready for it. And it's something that you continue to do on a regular basis, right?
I'm just laughing at the thought of your wife looking through your phone and you've got loads of texts for somebody like, can we meet? Why are you not texting me back? She's like, what's going on? It's a guy off the internet. He wants to play Age of Sigmar.
He wants to meet me. He wants to meet me and wear a yellow ribbon in his hair. Yeah. So right, let's say you figured out how often you want to play, and you figured out what sort of things you'd like to play. So let's say we're that person, we're creating this person, right? He's figured out that he wants to play again after a while. He knows what sort of games he wants to play. He knows how often he wants to play them. What might be the next step for somebody, or what step have you made? What experience do you have in making those steps to making that idea become a reality?
The first one, obviously, we've touched upon it already, is just somebody that you already know. And I don't quite like the word convert because it sounds a bit religious fanatic, but there might be somebody right in front of you, metaphorically speaking, that would be right up for having a few games.
Yeah, and there seems to be two routes here. There's people that play already, or people that could play, right? There's two routes there. One's a lower hanging fruit. One's a higher fruit. So I'd say the lower hanging fruit is figuring out who plays those games already, right? Now, you said about converting a pal, right? Would you say that was the low hanging fruit, or would you say that's the higher fruit?
I suppose it depends on the individual. Depends on your group of pals, you know. I think it's a crap answer, but it really depends.
No, if you were to generalize, right? I mean, if you take your friends, take both of your friends, me and Rob. I'm joking. If you take like just a cross section of people that you know, acquaintances, how many of them do you believe would say yes straight off the bat if you wanted to play a game with them?
A small percentage. Yeah, a small percentage, yeah. And I reckon...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say as well that the benefit, though, if you can find your existing friend, it's just that you're already friends with them for certain reasons, so they're not going to... You could find somebody that's like right into the same games as you and stuff, but that, I don't know, they might just really annoy you. They might turn up and just stick a box of fudge donuts on the table and start like eating crumbs all over the table. Like, you don't know. This is just a stranger that you've met. So that's the benefit of a friend is that you've kind of you've ensured that all that shit's not going to happen. So.
Well, that's the thing. And this is where it gets interesting for me in terms of my social phenomenon stuff. It's like I'm a big advocate of don't do what you can't undo until you know what you won't be able to do because of what you did. Let me say that again. Don't do what you can't undo until you know what you won't be able to do because of what you did, right? So if I've got a friend, I'm wary like previous friends that I have before I played games and stuff like that, I'm pretty wary of introducing them to games. So it's like if you've got a mate and you become mates because you're really into football, if I then start sidetracking him to board games and he's a prick when he's playing board games, then I might not, the friendship might be different. Does that kind of make sense? It might not be as good as it was before. So I'm not saying I wouldn't do that, but I'm always a little bit wary of it. And I have had success with that converting a friend, but I would say that's quite unless you're both saying, like you said, that Robert, he seems to be into RPGs and stuff like that before. That's not my experience with my friends. Like none of my friends really play these games, really, only a very few. So converting a friend, is it a risky business? I suppose it's not a risky business. Usually it shouldn't be a risky business, but I don't know. It's like, I guess it comes to the teach. So I had a friend who I worked with, and I got him to come play a few board games with me. I didn't go straight mass battle game because I thought that might be a big sell straight away, a little bit like teaching the wife or asking the girlfriend to play a game with you. But it's like your teach has got to be bob on. I think if you're converting a friend, I think you need to be doing something that is very simple. Like you mentioned your game, and you mentioned that it was a low bar entry, right? So did you specifically choose that game because it's quite simple and quite easy to pick up to help that conversion of a friend?
Yeah, and as much for myself as him, like I say, he's more switched on all this than I am. So for me, I've actually played relatively few games in my life, despite spending years doing this sort of stuff. So I thought, if we play this, I'm not going to be messing about looking at a book half the time. We will get the hang of it really quickly. So yeah, I think that was part of the choice to go for that game.
And so if someone is thinking about converting an existing friend, I would say that's like a higher fruit, but we do say the higher fruit is the sweeter fruit, right? The low-hanging fruit is the rotten stuff, the stuff that's going to fall off the part that everyone can reach for. So I think converting a friend is a great place to start in terms of having access to more people, because you're friends with them anyway, and you're obviously friends with them for a reason anyway. And if you can get them into the sort of things, it might be a new thing that you can do together. But I think what I'd say is the recommendation for that is you teach of the game has got to be bomb on, because if you get them in, and because you might be a little bit apprehensive about it, right? I mean, a lot of my friends have been like, because a lot of my friends I know from hobbies that aren't board gaming, they aren't tabletop wargaming. So if I've introduced them to it, it's because I think they might like it. But there's still that they're putting themselves in your hands, aren't they? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, yeah. It's like, yeah, what's it, like Lord of the Rings, mate, where, like, is it Gollum's in the forbidden pool when Frodo's been captured by the Gondorian Rangers? You know that scene?
Yeah.
Yeah, where like Frodo goes down and he goes, Smeagol, come with me. And Smeagol's like, we've got to go now? And he's like, yeah, come with Master. It's like kind of like that, like at the teach. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're putting a little bit of their trust in you. It's like, yeah, I'll come round to your house and yeah, I'll play that board game. There's only a small percentage, don't get me wrong, but they're putting their enjoyment of an evening in your hands, right? You with me? You got that? And
yeah.
So the teach, you've got to get that bob on, because if they have a shit time, and if you've got your nose in a rule book the entire time, or you're flustered or flummoxed or not sure what you should be doing, or shouldn't, that's going to detract away from the positivity of their evening, right? I know that when I played my mate, because I was big into V Commandos at that time, or V Sabotage as it is, I was like, mate, I think you'd really like this game. So I made sure that I knew the rules inside out, and I played it a few times myself solo, so that when I was inviting him into it, and this is the words of Alessio Cavatore, the games writer, he said, you should be spending a lot of time thinking about what you're going to do, not thinking about the rules. And so my job with my mate, that first one, was I just want him to be thinking about the cool stuff that he can do on the tabletop. I don't want him to be thinking about the rules. And so people say that I overthink certain things in certain ways, but because I kind of felt that I smashed that, I crushed that, I'd like to feel that it made it more likely that he'd enjoy it. And therefore, it would make it more likely that he'd want to return and play more games because of the positive experience that he had. Whereas a flip side experience was when me and the wife tried to play another game. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to poo-poo it, but we were playing a different game, and I didn't really prepare so much for it. And the game was quite clunky in terms of flipping to this page, flipping to that page, no glossary at the back of the book. And so we spent the majority of the time looking at the rule book, and we've not played that game ever again since because of that. So I'd say, like, very trying to go around the houses here, but if you are converting a friend, make sure you're on the ball with what you're playing. Like, I wouldn't be recommending playing a game for the first time with together. If it's a first kind of tentative steps, maybe the first time he's ever played that board game, or the first time he's ever played that tabletop board game, you want to try and give that person the best possible experience that you can, so that it's more likely to stick, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how much preparation did you do with your mate?
Just kind of made sure that I had picked out 2 war bands that were pretty much evenly matched, and it's got a very easy point system, so that wasn't too hard to do. Went up half an hour before we were due to meet and just set a wee table out. So yeah, it didn't take a lot of prep, but I made sure I was prepared, if you know what I mean. We weren't. Yep. I wasn't expecting him to turn up and have to do anything, because again, that falls back on what you've just said there. You just want somebody to turn up and have a good time playing the game.
Yeah, and that's it's something that's easy said, and you have to put yourself out a little bit. But it's kind of nice to do that, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, even if it's non-game related and someone just coming around to your house, you probably tidy up before they come around, right? You probably get a few, nibbles, maybe a bowl of peanuts, you get a few beers in the fridge or whatever. You've maybe asked them before they come around, hey man, I'm getting some beers for the weekend. What do you drink? Those are nice things to do, right? You've got to kind of open yourself up a little bit to be accommodating. And I think the more accommodating you can be, then the better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd heard you mention Space Hulk before. You used that as a bit of a gateway drug, didn't you? Because it's quite a good, like, out the box game.
Yeah, it's like, so when I've thought about converting an existing friend, it's like that's been my most successful, I would say. So the most positive experiences that I've had in this hobby have been from introducing people that I already know into the world. That's been the best thing, and Space Hook has been a really good one. Yeah, I much prefer boxed entities for initial experiences. I would say something that's a lot more clean cut. It's a lot more definitive in terms of, like, trying to avoid true line of sight, trying to avoid inch movement. That's for me personally. So Space Hook will be great. It's like, you've got 4 action points, and the things that you can do with your action points are this, and this. And then how far do they move? They move 1 square. So that cuts out a lot of stuff, because it's like, this guy moves 6 inches. This guy moves 12 inches. This guy has got a jetpack on, so he doesn't count height movement. I find that with, like, those games that are quite freeform, if you kind of use that spectrum that I mentioned before, like open environment and closed environment, if I'm trying to convert a friend who's never really played games before, I go much closer to the closed environment, because there's much less kind of clunk. I would call it clunk, but it's like, this guy has got 4 action points. He can move, he can shoot, he can scratch his ass, and he can do any of those 3 things, and as many times as he wants. So my mate might go, okay, right, he's going to go forward once, he's going to shoot, and he's going to scratch his ass, and then he's going to go forward again. You're like, right, happy days. So that player is thinking more about what they can do with their individual pieces, as opposed to, this is like, I don't know, what can this guy do? And he moves this distance. And then if he's moving over this barrier, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I think it's my job as the host to try and take any barriers or hurdles out the way of that individual, especially with the formative experience. So Space Hulk is good, because also with that, it's like a versus game. It's like a VS game. And this is what we'll come on to as well when we talk about, how to make that experience, is like, I'd be the Gene Stealer player in Space Hulk. There's Terminators, which are humans against these aliens. Not many people like to play the Terminators. Not many people like to play the aliens. So my job there is just to make sure this person has a nice time. So I will change the level of competitiveness based on how well that person is doing. So if he's a complete newbie, I would, purposely make mistakes or purposely not push an attack that I know could be successful, because I know that I'm playing the long game with this person. If I absolutely slam him and like pin his balls to the floor, he's going to be like, well, why would I ever play with you again? It was shit. It's just basically just like trashed me in. So I mean, did you do that too when you were playing your first game? Would you like ease off and ease them into it? Or were you like, no, this is the best way to learn, I'm going to slam you?
Nah, because it's not a game I'm particularly good at. I've not actually played it loads myself. Like I know it pretty well. But yeah, I mean, with two balanced forces playing that game, I dare say you could be really good at it. But no, we had a very even game in it. If I remember correctly, I think he beat me. So, yeah.
But you should just say, mate, you should take that. Yeah, it's intentional. Yeah, I eased off. Let ease you into it. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I think about this a lot because I want that person to have a decent time. I want them to have a nice time. I want them to feel like they're part of it. I don't, because I've had that experience, the opposite end of the spectrum negatively. So when I was first starting out in America, like a lot of the players that I would play in were competitive players, and they were absolutely curb stomping me, like just not holding back anything. And then they were like, yeah, that's the best way to learn. Like you need to get through this learning curve as quickly as possible. And I was like, well, I understand that, but also this is not interesting for me, like whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Like it was just, and not everyone was, not everyone was, some people were the exact opposite. Some people were really accommodating, really kind of helpful and things like that. But having experienced like that negative side where it was difficult to play again, because of the experience that I'd had on the tabletop, that kind of makes me very, very sensitive to people's feelings in those formative experiences. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to play that role forever. And I'm in the process of indoctrinating a new mate into the world of games at the moment. But I think you've got to get someone's feet under the table before you start serving them the meal, so to speak. And yeah, so I would say that the second thing you need to do if you're starting to go down this road of thinking about converting an existing pal is knowing the game well, know what you're doing, and make it fun for the individual, because them watching you flip through a rule book is not fun, right? Mm-hmm. I think we need to establish that is that you reading a rule book or them reading a rule book is not your idea of an exciting night, right? Right.
Yeah, I mean, the less stuff you're kind of shuffling through and looking through and, rummaging through a box or a bag and looking through a book, yeah, you need to at least give the aura of knowing what you're doing, I think. So, yeah. And I think DMs, like people talk about DMs for like RPG games, being a game manager, a GM or DM, whatever you want to call it, being a game manager really helps with this. Where people's enjoyment is in your hand, or people that work in kind of like situations like not necessarily marketing, but like people that maybe like events. If you've ever worked an event, if you've ever held a party or a stag do, or a dinner party, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's like, I was my brother's best man. So I organized a stag party and everything was geared around everyone having a really decent time. So you have to spend that time and think about what do people like? What do people want to do? And kind of like what you want to do and what you like kind of goes out the window for a certain period of time, right? It's kind of, I felt it was the same when I was trying to convert friends. It's like what I want out of this and what I like about this, it kind of needs to be held on pause. And because I want to get that in maybe 5 games time. So there's a guy who lives across the way from me, actually, in my apartment complex. He lives across the way, and he's just been a really nice, quiet guy that I've kind of known in passing for ages. And my wife kicks around with his wife. They go out, do different bits, shopping or whatever. And I just never really thought of just hanging out with him. So I was like, hey man, I like playing board games. You like board games? And he's like, I never really played any. And I was like, okay, well, there's this game called Memoir 44 that I quite like. Here's a video, how to play video of it. Have a quick look at it. And if you want to just hang out and grab a beer, just give me a shout. And he's like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And so we've played a couple of games of Memoir 44 now. We played a couple of games of War Chest. And he seems like he's really into it. He seems like he's really into the mental process of figuring out how to beat another person. He said, wow, I didn't even know that these games existed. Because we're on board games right now, as I mentioned, between open and closed environment. I'm working in a closed environment, something that's a lot more clean cut. Something like Memoir 44 is a good starting point because it's on a board. You just get a set of dudes
predefined group of dudes. You get some cards and it says, do this, do that, do that. It's very, very simple. And the way that the units move, the way that the units interact is very, very simple. So that I've set him on the positive path. Now, I didn't get so much personally out of the first Memoir 44 game, because what I was doing is I was teaching him, and my job was to just raise myself to his level. So that if he was doing really shit, I would just deflate myself and be really shit. And then if he was doing quite well, I would inflate myself to be a little bit better. I was mirroring what he was doing. And he seems to have had a positive time. And we played games subsequently since, and he seems to have a positive experience of that. So yeah, it's something that I think is really important to know the game well, know what you're doing, and make it fun and interactive for the other person. I think that's really important. So in terms of your perspective, if you're kind of talking about converting a friend and the positiveness of that and the things that we should do, is there anything you can add, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't want to labour the point. But like I say, it'll depend on the individual, won't it? A lot. Like some people, they might just either have no friends or have no friends that are up for it. So, but fortunately, there's plenty other options here too, isn't there?
Yeah, so go on. Because so say if you don't want to convert an existing friend, say you've just moved to a new city, you don't have any friends in that local area. What are our other options, mate? Give us another one.
Yeah, here's an open goal, Dan. You know this well. Playing with yourself is always an option. So we talked about Rangers of Shadow Deep earlier, and it's as far as I'm aware, it's like the most popular sort of game of its type in terms of that you could play it on its own. I'm prepared to stand corrected on that, but certainly the one I'm aware of the most. So a good starting point if you're desperate for a game is just to get something like this, which is essentially just a book. You could use whatever you have, and you can just set up a small game yourself and just play through it. And that might even, it's probably not your end game unless you live like in Antarctica or that and never see anyone and don't have any hope of seeing anyone. But it's a good way to just learn the rules and stuff like that as well. So it ties into the converting a friend, because you might think, okay, let me nail down how this game works, just playing it on my own, and then when it comes to playing it with my friend, I'll be pretty well versed with it. So yeah, for a lot of people that's not going to be the end game, but it's a good way that you can, if you're really itching to just have a game of something, you can actually just do it.
So what might you some other positives of playing solo? You've got the fact that you can prepare for playing somebody else. That's a big positive. Is there any other positives that you see about playing solo games?
I think a couple. So like if you've got an area in your house that you've set up temporarily for a game, it's kind of on your own terms. So you've maybe just got a game set up, like you see in TV and that people have got the chessboard with a game that's in motion, but they're not playing it. Maybe they come up, move a piece here and there. You could have one of those just in your house, go up, just, shoot my crossbow, reload it, move up here. That's me done. I'm away out. So you could have one of those ongoing games. But I think that the big benefit is it's totally on your own terms. Like if you weirdly have a schedule where 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. is your free time. I don't know why that would be, maybe night shift or something like that, but that is a point where you could just get a game. It's not like you need to either wake your wife up or convince your friend to come round at that time. So totally on your terms, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's like that's why historically I've painted a lot more than playing, because if I'm painting, I can choose whenever I want to do it. I can choose, like you say, the 2 a.m. Yeah, I think that's a really important point of playing solo. And it's a good confidence builder, I'd say, as you mentioned, like kind of if you're prepping, not necessarily even prepping to play games with others, but like we'll talk about this a little bit when we start talking about reaching out to maybe completely different people. But it's a little bit daunting, like playing somebody that you don't know for the first time, and depending on who you are and your social skill or your just experience of social situations, the meeting somebody you've never met before in a completely unknown place, it could potentially be quite daunting, right? And you need to remember that everyone's different and everyone's got different responses to things. So yeah, just I think playing with yourself can enable you to gain confidence. I remember when I was first learning 40K, I really appreciated watching battle reports on YouTube because I'd be painting, but I'd just be listening to what the hosts were saying in terms of the mechanics of the game, so that when I went to play somebody else, I could make that experience more positive because I knew what was happening. So I think solo games are a great way to do that too. Like you mentioned, you can make your mistakes in a solo game so that if you do want to play with other people, that experience is a lot smoother. Yeah, that's cool, man. So let's talk about some solo games. You mentioned there about Rangers of Shadow Deep being a kind of the main solo game that you're aware of, and in terms of like tabletop games, non-board based, I think I'd probably be inclined to agree. Can you think of any more kind of miniature non-board games that are solo in nature?
There is one for Song of Blades and Heroes. I totally forget its name. It might be Song of something else, but there is one that's designed with that mechanic in mind, I'm sure. I've not properly checked it out just yet. But again, I don't want loads of different games. I just want a few that I know. And Rangers of Shadow Deep scratches that solo/cooperative itch for me. So
yeah, so that's a fantasy skirmish game, I guess, by nature, in terms of trying to pigeonhole it. And that a Song of Blades and Heroes, again, that's going to be a fantasy skirmish-esque game, right? I'm not aware of many more. I'm thinking of in a sci-fi setting that's non-board based. I struggle to think of any more. I know that there's been kind of adaptations that people have made to certain games at certain times, but that was mainly the lockdown stuff. And I play a few solo games, but they're all board based. So there's the Valiant Defense series of games, which are done by David Thompson. There's Castle Itter. There is Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms, and there's another one which eludes me. And they're like kind of, solo war games. There's also a game that I got recently called Final Girl, which is it's like a horror game where you are the final girl. You're the last person alive, or the last person fighting against a horror character, and you got to do different things to kind of survive. And rescue other people and maybe potentially kill the bad guy too. So that's pretty good. One's just jumped to mind. Is it Don't Look Back, which is a kind of that's by mate. Tell you what, being out of the loop in terms of game stuff. Don't Look Back is by the people who make the MDF Train. I forget for the life of me what they're called, but they do that's like a horror theme as well, where it's like a kind of evolving story where you are like maybe a cheerleader or like the captain of the football team, and then there's a bad guy stalking about. You've got to move around the area, kind of discovering items and discovering stories and trying to take out the bad guy. So they are around. And the thing is as well is that there's a lot to be said about solo games in terms of personal enjoyment. Have you heard of what an alpha gamer is? Do you know an alpha gamer?
No.
So an alpha gamer is when you play solo or co-op, someone that kind of like takes over and tries to run everything.
Yeah.
And I guess when you got a solo, so if you're playing co-op game, because Rangers of Shadow Deep is like a co-op game. When you're playing a co-op game, you're playing with other people. Sometimes there's one person that tries to take control and tell everyone what to do instead of letting people find their own individual way, right? And equally, if you're playing a co-op game, you might have an idea about what you want to do. And then if someone else has got a different idea and disagrees, sometimes you spend time negatively talking about what you potentially want to do or feel like you're being shoved in a direction that you maybe don't want to go, which is a little bit suffocating sometimes for individual players. So when you're playing on your own, you're not going to get that situation, right? You're going to be able to do whatever you want, whenever you do it. And there's going to be no one kind of telling you that you shouldn't do these things.
True. I suppose the flip side is the shared experience thing. Like I'm just thinking there, you could, something spectacular could happen. And although you've enjoyed it, it's always good to have that wee chat afterwards. How cool was that? So like, for example, maybe you've got this Snotling on like his last half point of health and he just rolls like 6s, 26s in a row and kills ogres and trolls and everything. Like if that happened to you, I bet if you told somebody, they'd just be like, yeah, of course that happened. So
yeah, that's an important point. And the place where I'm at with solo games is I think I would do it in preparation to play with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm playing on my own, I'd probably just go video game route, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't personally, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not saying it's out of order. But for me, if I'm playing on my own, not in preparation to eventually play with somebody else, probably just play a video game instead. Zach off the Discord server, he swears by solo games. He plays Shadows of Brimstone like to death on his own, and he really enjoys that, and he really likes that. And Journeys in Middle Earth is another kind of solo / co-op game. Like adventure game, but it's board based. It's not kind of tabletop based, but that's something that can easily be done solo. And so there's a lot more board based games that have got solo options to them. And I think it's what's great about solo is that it seems to be coming more into people's kind of sphere of kind of view, if that makes sense. Like a lot more people are talking about solo games. A lot more games are coming out with solo modes as well, which is really good, right? Because it's a barrier to entry. So if you can remove a barrier of entry, like one of my most favorite games is Undaunted Normandy and Undaunted North Africa. They've come out with a solo mode for that recently as well. So it's like you're taking away a barrier. So like I said at the outset, is that one of the most common reasons that people say about not playing games so much is because they've got no one to play with, but you can play solo, and that's really, really helpful. Okay, cool. So we got convert an existing friend. We've got play solo. Like, say if we're looking to increase our games, we don't have any friends, we don't want to play on our own, what else can we do?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will have a store or a shop, as I like to call them, or a club local to them. Maybe not so much a club, because if you've got that, you've probably solved the problem to start with. But yeah, if you've got somewhere you go to buy your paints or your miniatures, and that might be a full GW, or it might just be one of those wee shops that like does some paints or either does a GW range or some other sort of range, you could ask behind the counter there, or even post some sort of wee ad if they'd let you. I'm sure if you're going in there and buying stuff, the person's going to be happy to help you keep enjoying that hobby, because that's ultimately beneficial to them, isn't it?
Yeah. So like reaching out in a local store, like, I think we've all, if you're into this, if you listen to this, you've probably been to a local store, right? And you either get asked, or you could ask about, what potentially goes on. I know that a lot of shops, they have like a weekly kind of itinerary that they put up. So it's like Monday's Magic Night, Tuesday's Sci-Fi Night, Wednesday's Fantasy Night, and they tend to have different nights. There's one that always pops up in my social media called Just Play, which is a game store in Liverpool. And they have regular nights, and they're regularly encouraging people to be like, come in on this night if you are interested in this. So that's something to look out for too, is because someone might not tell you about it, but it's up on the walls and they advertise it. And then so you don't even necessarily need to go and play that night. You could just be popping by to pick up some paints on that particular day and just kind of seeing, from afar, like what people are doing, and just kind of like wander about a little bit, ask a few questions, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a shop in your area that's doing any sort of hobby stuff, it's a no-brainer to at least use them as a sounding board to try and locate somebody. Like I say, they'll want to help you do that, because if you lose interest, they lose a customer. So it's totally in their interests.
How confident are you though? Like, have you done that? Have you gone into the store and say, "Excuse me, sir, I would like to play Rangers of Shadow Deep. Have you got this facility available?" It takes a lot of confidence to do that. So are you a confident person that would go and do that?
I've only not done it because, like you're saying, talking about going back to the very first thing about how often do you want to play, I'm not somebody who has a lot of slots for games lined up, so there's no real point in me doing that right now. I'm not saying I won't do it in the future. My other slight reservation is just these environments can be very GW heavy, and I'm not looking to get into 40k or that modern 40k or Sigmar or anything like that. I'm just not looking to get into a new game and do the whole starting from scratch. So maybe that's one of the other reasons I've not gone down this route.
Well, let's say you hadn't got Robert, right? You don't want to play with yourself. You don't want to convert a mate. Like, what would you do?
I think I'd go in and probably just ask about if they know anyone doing some Frostgrave, one of Joe McCulloch's games. Always up for those for multiple reasons. Like, you don't need to go and buy loads of stuff for them or that. So, but I don't know if the shop would be my first protocol. I think it'd probably be one of the other options that we're going to talk about. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like I probably would say if that is an option, you think about going into the shop at different times, different days, different nights when other games are going on. Like that might be a good shout. Like I kind of like finding new players to play. I often liken to like looking for a romantic relationship, right? And I think about the different romantic relationships that I've had in my life. Where have I met these people? And I liken the game store to like the nightclub, right? And I've never met a decent romantic partner in a nightclub, right? You might meet somebody that you knock around with for a bit, but it's that whole scenario of you go to a nightclub, you both kind of juiced up or whatever, and then you'd speak to them the next day, or you meet them a different time, and they could potentially be very different than what you thought they were that night. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I've found, and I might be completely wrong, I might be talking shit here, but like from my point of view, my experiences of meeting people in game stores, at the game stores, has been less successful than cultivating people that I already kind of know, because they're in a I found, and this is maybe just in America, it's no criticism whatsoever, but the personality in the game store was the personality that they are looking to portray, and not necessarily their true personality, if that makes sense. It was a little bit like a very big, flamboyant social thing, and it was like, I don't know, people acted a little bit different in the game store, and it was like, you're not quite sure if you're going to mesh with these people or not. You're not quite sure if they're going to play the game in the way that you kind of want it to be played. So you kind of follow along with that. And so I'm not saying for me I won't ever do it, but I've just found that I've converted friends. I've played some solo games, and I've met people at a game store, and out of those three, the game store has been the most fraught in terms of finding a connection. But having said that, you have to break that ice at some point, because if you don't have friends that want to play and you want to play, the game store is a place where people will all want to. That's the common thread that binds everyone there, is that everyone wants to play games. That's why they're there. You just got to find the right sort of person that you jive with, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say we don't want to do that straight away. Like, we don't necessarily want to go to the store. We're a bit shy. We don't want to, is there anything else that we can do?
Yeah, well, to go back to the dating analogy, I suppose, like there was that app. It's called Game4, which I downloaded, again, going back to just before the pandemic hit. So I think at the moment you can't get it. I think it's getting a total overhaul. I think they pulled it down because there was no point in having it up there for a couple of years, maybe. But the last I checked, it's still like it's going to be coming back. It's like I say, it's called Game4, just one word. So I went on there, would have been like early 2020, and I found somebody who was up for a game of Frostgrave in my area. I actually found somebody, and then the app died, and we'd never swapped phone numbers or email addresses. So I lost him. He's lost to me.
That's a sad story.
I know, but you never know, if the app comes back. And I'm sure there'll be more of these sort of apps pop up. It's probably something that not a lot of developers were interested in maybe investing in it in the last couple of years with the way things have been. But we're through that now. And hopefully we see a bit more of the sort of technology making this sort of stuff a bit easier. Yeah. So it's like there's certain people that want to play a certain game in your area. So like, talk us through the interface and how would you interact with those people? It being a couple of years ago, that was a lot of beer ago. So I don't know if I could I think you had your you had your profile, and it would maybe say, like, here's your I don't know, your postcode, your location, your town. We've got gamers within 10 miles of you. Here they are. You click on there, and it was weird because there was wee photos and that. It felt a bit seedy.
This sounds very seedy.
Now that I'm talking about it, it did. It really did. What I'd like to see is a system. Somebody's going to steal this and make loads of money. So I'm somebody, again, I keep mentioning him, a friend of the show, Joe McCulloch. At least I like him. He probably doesn't like me. But say Joe had access to an app, right? And it was all about, like, it was like a database of, like, here are my games. Here are all the players of my games who've registered on this. And it just shows you where they are. So I log into the Joe McCulloch gaming section of this app, and it says, 10 Frostgrave players within 20 miles, 15 Stargrave players, Rangers of Shadowdeep players, a couple of these other games. So he could just, like, sign up to that and be part of it, basically. So then you're specific, then you're not having to do the whole what games do you play and, what eras of the games do you play and that. It's just more straight up, like, here are the games I play, here's where I live. Do you fancy hooking up? So
Beryl is in your area. No, it makes sense. Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, because that's when we talk about, like, the social thing, the social aspect of it. It's like you kind of want to just cut to the chase, right? You want to cut the chit chat, and you want to get down to the nitty gritty of what you want out of it, right? So when you're trying to convert a friend, that might take a lot of time. It might take a lot of effort, and like you're saying about the teach. It might take you. It takes a lot of effort to get that happening. You have to play the game yourself. You have to figure out all of the game so that when that other person comes into that environment, you've done all the hard work, right? Whereas if you're using an app like this, or maybe you go into a store, then you could be getting the teach from somebody else who wants to give the teach, or you're both entering into it for the same reason. It's like, I want to play Frostgrave. You want to play Frostgrave. Happy days. We've got that connection. So the connection is more likely to be a stronger bond because you're both entering into it with the same intent. So that might be a positive thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. And just, again, that whole thing of, a person who plays this same game, they're bringing their own warband. What they're going to bring, we've maybe agreed on a certain level, but I'm up against these new minis. I've never seen them before. What are they going to do? And so that there's a whole interesting layer to that as well. Yeah,
I guess it avoids that kind of. I'm not going to be a sexist stereotype, but let's say your partner, the indecisive partner restaurant routine, right? Where you're like, are you hungry? Yeah. What do you want? Don't know. Should we go to this place? No. Should we go to that place? No. Should we go to this place? No. What do you want? Don't know. Well, let's not do anything now. Oh, no, but I'm hungry. That whole situation is like you kind of cut that out with this app, or maybe going into a game store, and it's like you cut all that out. It's like, I'm hungry. What do you want? Burger and chips. Brilliant. I want burger and chips too. Let's have that. It kind of cuts out a lot of that interplay that you might have to go through if you convert an existing friend. Or equally, sometimes you might not want to convert a friend that you currently have because you might want to broaden your horizon, or you might want to leave that relationship that you have with your friend in that compartment. You might not want to escalate that friendship. You might want to have widen your kind of experience of friends and widen your friendship group. And you might want to just, because I mention this because quite often when I socialize with my work friends, our common thread is work. So naturally, you spend some time talking about work, which personally I don't want to do. I love my work, I enjoy my work, but when I'm done, and I need that mental break. I need a flow state in a different area without bringing me back to this other thing. So maybe that's a negative of converting an existing friend, is you might be talking about things that you don't really want to talk about so much. You want to go and do something else. And when your common frame of reference is something very, very different, like Frostgrave, for example, or any game that you're playing, then that you want to talk about that more. You want to interact with that more. So that's a positive thing, right?
Yeah, I think as well, like, not to dwell on the point, but if sometimes, if you are if you were hypothetically meeting a pal to play a game, you've got loads of other things in common. You could spend the first 45 minutes chatting shit about something that you're both interested in, and it's hard for one of you to say, should we start this game? Whereas if you've done the transaction on the internet, you know, let's meet up, let's do this game. You know, it's straight to business, clothes off. I'm with you. If I'm playing a game, I'm playing a game.
Like, I don't want to be talking chit chat. I don't want any soft talk. I'm straight in. Give me the hard stuff.
You've got the orange in the mouth and the mask on.
We both know why we're here. Let's just get involved. So that's the important thing. I quite like that. I quite like compartmentalized friends. I quite like that. It keeps it simple and clear cut. And I do quite like that. I like having a gaming friend. I like having work friend. I like that distinction. I really, really do. But your next note was post a paper ad or a library notice board. Legit? Do you think that still happens? Do you think some people post an ad in a paper saying, "Hey, Dan, 37, looking for a game, looking for a monthly game"? Do you think that happens?
I don't know that the paper. I don't know that the paper is the option, but I think the community centre or the library could be an old school option. Like this could be very hit or miss. But say, for example, there's a community centre that's fairly busy. You know, maybe there's like a chess club or a snooker club or whatever. Who knows? Like, how much effort would it take just to put a wee bit of paper up? You know, can I leave this here? And it's just, you know, I'm interested in playing, and you could just mention some of the more famous games, you know, Warhammer-esque games or something like that, miniature games, whatever. And who knows, like, it would take you possibly 10 minutes to do it.
I had a chuckle about that, but there's actually something that's very, very important to know is that you meet strange or good people in strange places and in strange situations, don't you? And you never know what other people are thinking. And there's lots of people who might, and I ask this question a lot to people on shows and things like that, like how saturated do you believe our hobby to be? Do you believe that everyone who could be interested in this hobby is aware of it and has chosen it or not? Or do you believe that there's a whole audience of people who might potentially be interested in it if they were introduced to it in the correct way? Does that kind of make sense? So you talk about like a newspaper advertisement or like something in a local store or library or whatever, and just putting up an ad. How long would that take? Minutes. But if you get one decent gaming friend out of it, you find great people in very strange places, and you never know that could be what that person has been looking for. They just didn't know it. You know, and forming that connection. So I had a chuckle at it. But then when you actually think about it, you think, what's the worst that could happen? You could get an axe murderer come around to your house. I guess that's the worst thing that could happen. But you know what I mean? The potential of a positive connection is huge, right? From that just taking that time to try to reach out to people.
Yeah, and like I say, if the community centre or library in question, you know, if it actively has folks going along doing things like snooker and chess, those are people who like to just get out the house and do a wee activity. So by that means they're more receptive to probably trying out something like this too. So
there's a place in Wales called The Shed. And what The Shed is it's just a kind of a big indoor area that's got like sanders and saws and screwdrivers and tools and wood. And it's got a kettle and it's got some biscuits, and it's just open, and it's like aimed at like middle-aged fellas. Middle-aged fellas don't stereotypically tend to be the best socially. They don't tend to socialize as much. They don't tend to talk about feelings and emotions and things as much. They tend to suppress the feelings as opposed to explore and get involved. And so this place called The Shed opens, and it's just for fellas to go down there and just to make like a spice rack and have a brew. And then other fellas who want to make, I don't know, a shoehorn can go there and they just hang out, if that kind of makes sense. And so it's my belief that millions of us are quite lonely, and we're not quite sure what to do or how to interact with people. And board games and tabletop war games are a way to focus on something other than chit chat, which a lot of us aren't that great at. And so like going back to the advertisement or the library or whatever it is, like you could find a really great friend who wants to start a new hobby, but that person just isn't quite sure what to do or how to do it. And so that could be something that's really important. Like, and it's in those places that you wouldn't expect. Why? Because it's off the beaten track. If you go to the game store, everyone that goes to the game store already likes those games. But if you're doing it in a place that's unrelated, like, the supermarket checkout areas, I know that supermarket checkout areas, they often have notice boards and different things like that where people are buying and selling stuff. You just never know who's going to read it. And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be like, self-inflating my ego to the point of that I'm saving lives. I've saved a guy from suicide because he's coming and playing games with me. It's not about that. I guess it's a simple act of kindness, right? It's an outreached hand. That's what it is. You're extending a hand out, and you never know who might grab it. And some of them might be negative. But a lot of it's probably going to be positive because a lot of people are just nice people, aren't they? Like, it's my belief as well is that the majority of us are nice people. And yeah, just reaching out through unconventional means is something that might really benefit both people, right?
Yeah, and loneliness is such a big issue after the last couple of years too. People, I think it hit home just how much we need social connection. And, online's great, but nothing beats in-person interaction. Just riffing off the back of this idea, and this isn't something I wrote down because it's way out of left field, but it's kind of similar in some ways. So what about you mail blast your local community? So say you have you take the surrounding 20 streets that around you, or you could do your whole town. You could just spend like 200 quid on this, right? You get a wee leaflet and you write down, going to be starting a games club in the area, this sort of games, again, Warhammer-esque, miniature games, whatever, and just an email address on it. You probably get a couple of kids emailing you or signing you up to something. But, again, if you got one person and you played games with them for the rest of your life, fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, there's loads of public spaces that are accessible. And the UK especially, there's so many different community halls and different things which are spaces that you can rent out. I mean, heck, even a pub. I mean, I've done this myself, is that I spoke to a cafe and said, hey, is it possible for you to open outside of your normal hours? If I can bring 5 people in, would you open for us? And they said, yeah, as long as those people are going to be understanding that we've opened for them and that we'd like everyone to buy a coffee and a bagel, then we'll do it. Then it's in their best interest because it's a time that they would have been closed anyway. And so all they need is one person. It's usually been the owner, so they're not paying wages or anything like that. The owner sticks around for 3 hours, especially if the owner is interested in it as well. The place that I did it, the owner wasn't interested. They would have sat there reading a book. But to them, it's no big deal. But then when we had this board game event, people loved it. It was really good. And it then became like a regular thing. Like, I'm not even part of it anymore, but it became a regular thing where people would go and do that. And so where there's a will, there's a way. I think that's the message. You say like, mail drop your local area or whatever it is. But you know what? It's like saying, hey, I'm going to be at this place. It's the way you frame it. And it's about how confident you are, isn't it? I'm fairly confident with it. So it's like, are you bored? Are you wanting more friends? I'm going to be at, this library at this day playing some board games. It's free. Come and hang out if you want to. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, and it might not even be you that makes that connection or makes that friend. It might be somebody else. But being that glue, that social glue, taking a chance, rolling the dice, being the change that you want to see, doing something that's good, doing something that brings people together is brilliant. Why not do that? You're totally right.
Do you think on the night when you get together and everyone's like, so who was the guy who sent out the blast? You're like, don't know, mate. I just came along like you guys. So.
Yeah, don't know. Yeah. Well, it depends on how's it going. If it's going great, then yeah, it was me.
Yeah, it was actually me. Yeah.
it's going badly. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking literally letterboxes. House doing every door. You could hire people that will do that.
I think I'd hire a plane with a big sign off the back of it.
Yeah, just drop them.
Just fly around the city. You have those big signs that come off the back of the plane.
Oh yeah, aye, yeah.
Yeah. Just fly around the city for an afternoon. For a good time. Call 087. No, but you know what I mean. But I think that inventiveness, that creativeness, is something that if you genuinely want to play more games, like, don't get me wrong, the best scenario is you just make a marginal small effort to interact, and you uncover a already established system that you can just plug straight into. That's what we all want, right? Mm-hmm. You want to just go to the shop and say, I want to play Frostgrave. And they go, oh, well, that's great, because Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 20 people come each day and play Frostgrave. And they're always looking for new players. And you go, oh, brilliant, thank you. Like, that's what we all want, right? But what I've found is that doesn't often exist. Yeah. And if it does exist, the people that are doing those things, you don't necessarily always engage with fully, because that system has already been created. That world has already been created, and you have to go and live in that world. Whereas if you're the person that does that, you get to create that world that you want to see, instead of maybe being part of a world that's already been created. So we all want that all fully established system that we really engage with, and we go. I mean, to use an example, on our Discord server now, we're in the middle of another league. Like we do leagues regularly, and I run the leagues. And no one else has ever run any of the leagues. A couple of people have tried to run the leagues, and it's not a criticism of them, but it's a pain in the ass to run the league. You have to organize the fixtures. You have to update the table. You have to, chivvy people along if they're not fulfilling the fixtures, and figure out what needs to be fixed and stuff like that. It takes a lot of time. And I think people just presume that I like that. And it's all right, but I'd rather not do it. I'd rather someone else do it. But it's the point where it's like, well, if I didn't do it, then we wouldn't have a league. Yeah. But having said that, all things considered, it's worth it, because everyone's playing a game every week. You got people in Australia, people in Europe, people in North America, that are getting together every week and playing at least one game together, which is pretty special. But if I wasn't doing that, that wouldn't happen. So that's the thing with it, is that you want to play more games, make more games occur. And you need, you could just have one friend that you play games with, or you could create 10 people that not only play you, but they also play with each other. So yeah, man, hire the plane, fly around the city, post letters in everyone's letterbox. Be inventive, be creative, because you never know what might come up. And extending it beyond your borders is, there might be someone sitting bored out the red watching telly of the night that would love playing games with you. They just don't know it yet, because they haven't had the opportunity. And then that little leaflet drops through the door like an answer from heaven. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe. Probably not, but maybe. We've kind of left the most obvious one till last, right? So what might be, we've gone around the houses here, and you might think, I don't want to play solo. I don't want to go into the game store. I don't want to post an ad in a paper. Like, this is the thing why haven't you mentioned this? I guess people have been screaming for a while. So what might be the most obvious thing that people could do to play more? Yeah, social media, which in the main, I have a really negative opinion of, but I can't argue that there are some good positives of it, particularly, there's a lot of very good groups on platforms like Facebook that are dedicated to either an era or an aesthetic or a particular game, and these could have thousands of members. So if you just pop in there and say, hey, anyone from wherever, Scotland, or narrow it down even more, then you might well find, it's reasonable to think that you might find somebody in your area. So that is a low-hanging fruit, definitely. Yeah, I always say that's the apart from the game store, that's the most low-hanging in terms of like the level of effort it takes to do it. I'd say game store is the easiest, but most fraught, in my opinion, but doesn't always necessarily be that good, as my personal experience. Facebook, you can go onto Facebook and you can type in anything. You could type in like 32 millimeter labradoodles, and there probably would be a group for that.
Yeah, well, like 10,000 people in it.
Yeah. So yeah, that is always a good place. But you can't always guarantee locations on that. A lot of those groups are worldwide, right?
Yeah, I think you've just got to fire a message out and just say, here I am, come and get me, lads. Days.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that, like, going back to kind of the start, as we kind of try and bring it full circle, like, a lot of people say, like, I want to play more. And my kind of response, that sometimes I voice and sometimes I don't, is always like, yeah, but do you, though? But do you actually want to play more games, though? Because you say that you do, but you do very little to actually play games. And I know that might sound a little bit mean, and it's not intended to be mean, but for me, it's like, if I want to do something, I'll find a way to do it. Like, if I genuinely want to do something, I'll do not everything I can. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like moving mountains just to roll some dice for a day. But if I genuinely, seriously want to do something, I'll find a way to do it. So if someone's saying, like, oh, I really want to play more games, like, internally, most of the time, I'm like, yeah, but do you, though? Because if you did, you just go and do it, right? Am I wrong? Am I out of order? Am I mean? Or do you kind of agree?
No, I mean, I think there's always wee caveats and bits and pieces with the individual about reasons that it might not be possible, at least all the time. But I think what we've uncovered here, without a huge amount of effort, to be honest, is just that there are loads of ways. What I'm trying to say is, if you're prepared to make time to play, then not being able to find someone is probably not an obstacle, because there's loads of ways you could find people. Again, there are exceptions. You could live 1,000 miles from any other human, in which case, fair enough, you're stuck online or with solo. But for most people, one of these things we've talked about will at least find them one person, I would think.
Yeah, and there's kind of two things that I wanted to talk about to kind of round this out. And the first one is a story from a fella in America who really wanted to play a certain game. And what he did is he just went to the store with he created 2 demo forces for this game, really well painted. And he learned the game. He painted up 2 demo forces, and he said to the person in the store, like, is it okay if I come on Tuesday night and just kind of set up the game and just wait and like paint and just see if anyone comes by? And so what he did is he just, every Tuesday for like 6 to 8 weeks, I think it was, he just went, like, say on a Tuesday, I can't remember exactly when it was, he just went every Tuesday for like 6 to 8 weeks, and he put on Facebook, he told the store owner, I think he put a little poster up, and he just went and sat there. And he was like, saying the first couple of weeks, like, maybe 1 or 2 people came and were like, hey man, how's it going? And he was just painting. And he was like, oh, hey, do you want to come and play this game? And they were like, no, I need to go. I'm just coming for some paints. But he's like, said by like 3rd, 4th week, he was starting to get people that would come and try a demo game. And some people tried a demo game and didn't really like it, never really saw it again. But that's good, man. This person put in like a sustained level of effort to really make it happen, right? And that's something that can be done. Is everyone going to do that? Probably not, but that's good dedication. That was the kind of first thing that I kind of wanted to mention. And the second thing was, like, don't discount like things like Tabletop Simulator. I play a lot of Tabletop Simulator games, not because I believe them to be better, but it's a lot more accessible in terms of it takes away a lot of barriers to entry. Because if you think about the time it takes to arrange a game with somebody else, go to a store, have a little bit of a chit chat either before and after the game, or either. It's a big time commitment. The travel there, the travel back, the chit chat between, the go into a store. There's a bigger commitment in that than just saying, "Hey man, do you fancy a game?" Yeah, okay. When can we play? 7:00 on Thursday, no problem. And then you're on Tabletop Simulator, and it's on straight away. You don't need to leave the comfort of your own home. If you've got a young family, if you need to be around, if you're a carer for a family member or something like that, you're right there. If you need to break off the game, you can save it, come back to it later. Like for me, like, not discounting Tabletop Simulator. If you want to play more games, I would say that not discounting Tabletop Simulator is something that's really important. I don't particularly like it with true line of sight, like trying to get sight lines and also measuring inches. You can do it. I don't think that's its best area. Like board-based games are a lot better. But I've also enjoyed it because instead of just having to play who's in my vicinity, Beryl from Berwick is waiting to play. Instead of just playing the people in my area, I'm able to choose the people I play. And so I'm having better gaming experiences because I'm able to choose players who I mesh with better, as opposed to just saying, well, if I want to play this game, I have to play Big John. And he's a bit of a prick, but he's the only person that plays it. So yeah, like one, dedication to go to the store and put yourself in the shop window, so to speak. Take your game, sit there, wait for a fish to swim by. Option one, to get more games. Option two, don't discount Tabletop Simulator. And that'll help you out of a lot of situations, because I'm sure we've all been there where it's like, I really want to go to the gym, but I can't be arsed leaving the house. I really want to play a game, but the game store's 45 minutes away and it's an hour away from my mate. You know, there's a big commitment in there.
There you go then, problem solved, isn't it? Thanks very much for taking the time to listen. I really hope that was useful, and you can check out both podcasts' respective websites at paintalltheminis.com and bedroombattlefields.com. Be sure to subscribe or follow both shows on your listening app of choice too. Just search for Paint All The Minis and Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Right, I'm off to print out 60,000 leaflets and post them through the doors around here. Wish me luck, and if all goes well, I'll speak to you on the next one.